Back to
Remember When.
Here's Ed Randall and Kevin Kennedy.
On this Saturday morning on Remember When, Bob Uecker said it was easy to catch the knuckleball. Just run back to the backstop and pick it up after it stops rolling. Our guest would love to teach you about the knuckleball. The pitch is virtually extinct. How about reviving it during a time of a tsunami of arm injuries? Our guest runs the Knuckleball Academy out of a facility located 10 miles from LAX. Joining me and my partner, who caught for 16 years and has some knuckleball horror stories of his own, we welcome to Remember When, Chris Nowlin. Chris, it's great to have you on the show. I saw this piece about you, and I said, I got to get this guy on our show. Tell us about your background.
I actually got into baseball pretty late. I didn't play baseball in high school or college, and the first time I pitched on the regulation mound was in professional baseball, and it was all because of the knuckleball.
And where did you play?
I've been bouncing around the independent leagues for a while now. So I actually played last year, and
who'd you play for?
I played for the Portland Mavericks under Alan Embry up in Oregon. And
Alan Embry, who got the final out to send the Red Sox to the World Series against the Yankees in 2004. Tell us about your history with the knuckleball.
It all started a long time ago. I grew up outside of Boston, and when I was a kid, my dad took me to Fenway Park, and I just so happened to be old enough where he trusted me to run around the park, and me and my buddy ended up out in the bleachers, screaming for Mo Vaughn to hit us a home run, and
me too.
We got kicked out of Stephen. Yeah. And then we got kicked out of Stephen King's seats, and then I ended up right behind the backstop one night, and Wakefield took a no-hitter into the 8th inning against the Oakland A's, and the umpire out of the way, the knuckleball was dancing all over the place with the green monster in the background, and I absolutely fell in love with the pitch and became absolutely mesmerized, and that moment sort of really dictated what I did with the rest of my life, and I looked it up last night, Kevin. You were actually managing that night, so you were about 100 feet away from me.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Hey, Wake. Oh, that's great. What a coincidence. Small world. Wake was, he won 16 games that year, and he almost won the Cy Young Award. He finished third. But without Wake, we wouldn't have won the division that year. He was unbelievable.
Yeah, really he was floating that thing like 65 miles an hour back then, and the Boston Globe ran a whole full-page picture of his grip, and I took it from there. I was throwing tennis balls up against sheds and wiffle balls to my buddies, and as a kid, and then as I grew up, when I went off to college, and I played varsity basketball in high school. I never played baseball, and I got to college, and I started sneaking into the baseball facility and just started throwing knuckleballs into a sock net with my headphones on. And my senior year, my friends caught me, and they told me to go to a tryout. So I ended up going to a tryout that turned out really well. The cross-checker for the Cincinnati Reds was telling me that they were going to draft me that year out of nowhere. And
that's great.
I didn't end up getting drafted, but he convinced me to chase it. So I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona, and set up shop and taught myself how to pitch.
So you basically taught yourself, Chris, the knuckleball, you taught yourself?
Well, in the beginning, yeah. When I moved out to Phoenix, I spent a year teaching myself how to pitch, and then I went to every tryout I could, and I was driving all over the Southwest, including out to where I live now in Los Angeles, and everybody was telling me the same thing. They were saying, hey, this is really great, but I don't know how to judge it. I don't know, all the scouts are saying, I don't know what I'm looking at here. And so one day I was out at a tryout out in Long Beach, and Charlie Hough just so happened to be there. And
oh wow!
And he gave me his phone number. He called me horse expletive with potential. And he said to call him in a couple weeks, and I called him back, and he brought me out to Orange County, and he became my mentor, and I learned alongside RA Dickey.
And also, Chris, you knew Phil Niekro.
Yeah, I became really close with Phil Niekro over the last 7 years or so. I would run a clinic out there in Atlanta, and he was kind enough to show up and give everybody some pointers every year. And we grew pretty close there and then, unfortunately he passed. But he was a great guy. We poured a lot of his wisdom into him.
And he and Hoyt Wilhelm rode their knuckleballs, Kevin, straight to 25 Main Street in Cooperstown, New York. Yeah. All right, Kevin, 16 years behind the plate. Let's have some stories.
Well, my first one was in high school. I had a guy that we lost actually at a very young age. Gary Dolan was another pitcher in the big leagues, but he had a great knuckleball. I'm in high school as a young catcher, and he was a couple of years older than me. I'd never caught one before, and I caught since I was 8. And I finally learned that because we didn't have anybody to teach how to catch that. People think you go out and receive it like you do a normal pitch, fastball, breaking ball, whatever. But on a knuckleball, you got to stay back with your glove hand and really keep it back because of the late movement. And so I got to learn how to do that before I became a professional. Now, when I was a professional, honestly, with Baltimore, we didn't have too many guys that threw. We had a couple that threw the knuckleball, but I think because of my experience in high school, at least I had a little knowledge on how to receive it. Because, like I said, a lot of guys didn't know them. They just had the regular glove, not the big mitt, and they would just go to it and receive it with their lead hand, their glove hand, and the ball would move at the last instant, and they'd clank it and go to the backstop. So you just really had to learn as a catcher, Ed and Chris, to keep your glove hand back toward your chest protector a lot, because you're going to have that late last movement. And I got to know the Niekro brothers. They were handling the Silver Bullet team in '95, and they were in a hotel. And Wakefield had gotten released by Pittsburgh, and so we had Wake talk to the Niekros, especially Joe was the biggest part of it. And they taught Wake to not be afraid to throw the knuckleball 2-0 or 3-1. Don't always throw your fastball. And I never forget, Strawberry was up against the Yankees, and we're playing at Yankee Stadium early in the season that year. And Wake throws a 2-0 fastball to Strawberry, and I think it's still going. It was in the upper deck in right field for a home run. And I said to Wake, I said, did you forget what Niekro told you to do? Don't be afraid to throw your knuckleball on all counts, because Strawberry's just sitting on your 81-mile-an-hour fastball. And I think that's the last time Wake threw that. So you have to throw it on all counts, right, Chris? I mean, that's really what you got to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I play, in the independent minor leagues, I start going into my motion with the knuckleball. The catcher has to flash any sign, and then I change to a fastball last second. So I don't even think about it. Yeah.
Tell us, Chris, we're with Chris Nowlin, who has founded the Knuckleball Academy in Los Angeles. Tell us how you came up with the idea of the Knuckleball Academy.
Well, I obviously, like I told you guys, I started playing competitive baseball pretty late. I made my professional debut. That was the first time I ever pitched. So I was 25 years old. So I sort of liken it to learning a language. When you're a small child, it's really easy to pick up a new language. And I chose to, I started pretty late. So it was like an adult trying to learn a language. So it started out pretty clunky for me. I had to learn all the movements. And so I really had to get granular with the mechanics. I really had to learn everything from how your foot's positioned on the mound to where you put your weight on your foot. I mean, all the tiniest little movements I internalized from Charlie Hough and Phil Niekro. And then I realized, I could teach this. I could teach this to anybody. I've been doing this for years, and I know what works. And so I put out a call for my first clinic in Las Vegas maybe 10 years ago, and I got a pretty big crowd. So it all just started organically growing from there. And from there, I taught a couple of guys that got signed. Went into professional baseball. Yeah.
Kevin, who did you catch that threw the knuckleball that we would know?
No big names. They were guys that never really made it. But I'll tell you, we had one with the Dodgers, Dennis Springer. that was a regular pitcher that didn't have great stuff. And because of Charlie Hough and the Dodgers' success with Charlie Hough, we made Dennis into a knuckleball pitcher. And I didn't honestly think he was going to get to the big leagues, but because he stayed with it, and that's all he started throwing, and he got away from his normal stuff, because he had a pretty good repertoire of pitches. You know, he had 4 pitches, but, you know, he was told, and I was one of them, that, you know, your best chance to make it is stick with the knuckleball. And this is obviously before I managed Wakefield, and I was in the minor leagues with the Dodgers at the time. And Dennis kept with it, went to Instructional League, eventually went to Winter Ball, and I don't remember how many years he got, but I do know that he got, I think Tampa Bay had him in the big leagues. I can't remember how many years, but he got there because of the knuckleball. He never would have had a big league career, let alone a pension from the big leagues, had he not developed that pitch. And I think it's great, Chris, what you're doing, because especially with the velocity today, everybody's trying to throw 95 to 100 miles an hour. It's a great off-speed pitch. I mean, I could just see Wakefield might just eat these guys up today like he did back in '95. I mean, he'd be licking his chops to pitch the fastball hitters today, because
with his 66-mile-an-hour fastball that he featured in Game 1 of the 2004 World Series. And speaking of Tampa Bay, Chris, Andrew Freeman, now of the Dodgers, said that when he was at Tampa Bay, they had a knuckleball camp to try to create knuckleball pitchers, and I'm sure you know about this.
Yeah, I do know about that. Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't a part of it. But you know, I think it's a really good idea, especially in this day and age, because that launch angle swing that they're all looking for is really bad for the knuckleball. They're only going to hit pieces of the ball, and then there's a phenomenon called the knuckleball hangover. So when, you know, you throw a guy like Wakefield or like myself throwing 65, 68 miles an hour, and then you get a guy in there throwing 95, his ERA drops 1 run.
Wow.
For the rest of that game and for the starter the next day.
That's exactly what we try to do with Wake. A sandwich of Clemens in between, you know, around him. That's exactly what we did, you know, in our rotation. Yeah, and it worked. There's no question about it.
You know, to the point you guys are making, velocity is king. Throwing 100 miles an hour is no longer a novelty.
No.
Change-ups are coming in at 88 to 90, and then you throw this slop out there at 65.
Yeah, I'm shocked at the Tampa Bay Rays, especially that team, you know, with all their experimentation with openers. I mean, a knuckleballer would be a killer opener one time through the lineup, and then, you know, you bring somebody in like Glass now, and he would just no chance at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Tyler Glass, what a great arm he has. Yeah, you're right about that. I think stay with it. I think you're going to get a lot of clients to the big leagues, and you should get a lot of credit for it. I think it's a great idea.
To the point that you guys are making, Kevin, with you putting Wakefield in between Clemens and Hansen with his great curveball, and what you're talking about, Chris, about a knuckleballer as a potential opener, that would be devastating for hitters, especially in this time where as you talked about, the launch angle swing.
Yeah, absolutely. You put that bat, you know, on an upward angle, you're not taking the bat very long through the zone, and you know, you're just going to hit pieces of it. You'd be lucky to get a hold of one. I mean, they would have to, you know, you give them 2 options. They either stick with that launch angle swing, or they change their swing, which wouldn't be very good, because then you unload the bullpen or put in a guy like Glass now behind the knuckleballer, and, you know, they're tied in knots for at least 5-6 innings.
Yeah, you're talking a 40-mile-an-hour differential there between a 60-plus-mile-an-hour knuckleball and Glass now is 98 to 100. Yeah, that's a good idea, no doubt.
Chris, the big issue for me seems to be who's going to teach the knuckleball.
You know, that's a tough one. You know, Phil's passed, and Charlie's getting up there in age, and you know, I'm lucky enough to have their wisdom poured into me, and I think I've deconstructed enough. I've dwelled on it for more than a decade, and you know, I would like to serve as that link between the past and all of its wisdom and the future of the knuckleball. I think, I was lucky enough to have lunch with Charlie Hough one day. I see him a few times a year, and he told me I should be an MLB consultant and I should carry this forward for everybody.
You should. Absolutely, you should.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I were running a club today, I would want a knuckleballer again. I mean, if people say they're tough to manage, I didn't have any problem with it, with Wakefield. The only time I can remember going out there a couple of times, I was on certain hitters I really knew well. I remember Juan Gonzalez was up there with a couple of outs in Boston. And Juan Gonzalez was coming up. He got the 2 strikes, and then Juan was fouling off some pitches, and Wake had the count. I think it was 2-2. I went out to the mound. Usually you don't do that as a manager, but I said, if you can drop this down in the dirt, Juan will strike out. He'll swing and miss. I had him in Texas, and I knew he was a low ball hitter, and he would chase the ball right as long as you make it look like a strike and it drops down. If you can do that at Wake, that's what I said to him. I said, we got a strikeout here. We'll get out of this inning, and we'll win this game. I went back to the dugout. His next pitch was the bottom fell out of it right over home plate, and Juan had a huge swing, struck out, and we won the game. So, but he was able to do that. But he told me, I knew he had learned that from the Niekros, how to make the knuckleball go one way or the other. Is that something, Chris, that you teach as well?
Well, it takes an incredible amount of touch to do that.
Yeah, sure does.
Once you get to that level, I'm sure Wake was able to do that. If you watch the slow-mos of Wake's knuckleballs, those up-close one, he does what Charlie Hough preaches and what Phil Niekro preaches, and that knuckleball, if there's any spin on it, it has to roll forward. Very important, because otherwise it doesn't bite the air. It doesn't get any of that, that sort of friction that it needs. And that sort of little bit of forward tilt is going to make the ball bottom out.
That's what he did. You're right. Exactly.
Yeah. The knuckleball is a little more difficult than people realize, because it's not just about killing the spin. It's also about controlling what little spin is on the ball. Because if that ball rolls backwards at all, even if it's just a little bit, it's not going to dive for you. It's going to stay pretty flat. And, even though it's bouncing around, it stays on a level plane, and it's easier to barrel up. So,
right. Yeah.
So Wakefield is a machine at rolling that ball just a little bit forward. And so that's why he got all that depth. And that's why he could just start it lower and hit the plate for you. Now, making it go left and right is a little more difficult, and then you're kind of playing with fire when you start doing that, because then you can get to a place where you're spinning the ball backwards, and that's the danger zone. So it is possible to do. It's just you have to be extremely confident and very experienced to do.
Yeah, I don't remember Wake doing it so much left and right, but I remember Niekro trying to teach that to him. But I do remember what you just said. He had that tilt going down, and he had this. He could drop it where it looked like a strike at the knees, and right when he got to home plate, bottom would drop back, kind of like the old split ball that Suter used to throw.
Well, that's sort of the challenge, right? When you get into a game, every mound is different. The weather conditions are different. The wind is different. And you've got to find the height of the knuckleball. So, and it changes from day to day. So I might be throwing at the umpire's mask one day, and then I'll be throwing at the catcher's mask the other day. And that, because you're putting a little bit of forward tilt on the ball every time. And so it's going to be dropping, and it drops differently from day to day. So that's the biggest challenge. Once you master the knuckleball, the biggest challenge is hitting the ground running and knowing exactly what height to bring the ball in to get in the strike zone.
Chris Nowlin has started the Knuckleball Academy. Of the knuckleball, Richie Hebner once compared it to, quote, eating soup with a fork, unquote. Willie Stargell compared it to, quote, a butterfly with hiccups. We wish you well, Chris. It seems at this time that there is less fatigue on the arm for knuckleball pitchers who can throw more innings more often. You would hope that the knuckleball will be revived. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for being with us.
All right, thanks, guys.
With technical production assistance from Alec Walt, there goes our technically hip broadcast for January 22nd, 2022, where we've scattered yet some more wreckage across the broadcast landscape. Kevin, stay well.
I will. Thank you, Ed. Always. Appreciate it very much.
And thanks everybody for listening to Remember When. We'll see you next week on Sirius XM Radio.
Talk baseball every day on MLB Network Radio and get expert analysis and interviews with the game's best on Sirius XM Channel 89.
You listen. Now it's time to follow. Twitter.com/MLB Network Radio.